they'll mock and say I don't have his drive. Well, I guess in a way that's sort of true. See, I was never good at parallel parking. I'm known for bumping the shoulder, too.
All right, I am here with Randy Vincent, aka Homeschool. You got a whole intro. God is good. Homeschool. CH. You want to do it? I don't know the. I don't know the
Sure.
verbatim.
Okay, it's homeschool, school with a K, because you can't see H. God is good, homeschool is weird, battle rap is fun, and occasionally I'll add variants to it and
Yeah,
play with
yeah,
the situation at hand and whatnot.
yeah.
It
So
was
for
something
any,
that kind of evolved over time. I started out with like a different version of that, and it just kept working, and it ended up being what I say.
right, right. So for anybody who doesn't know you, so I met you in the battle rap scene. You
hmm
are, I would say, I dare say a legend. I think in the iBattle scene. You were for sure when I first started at iBattle, you were like the logo, I think, and arguably, you still are, but you got a lot more competition now, man. You got There's a lot of people
Well,
that came in. You got Appa, all those people, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but yeah, you can say
the the talent pool at iBattle is a lot deeper these days. I like to
for
say
sure.
that the year when I came in, the top three prospects were me, Outlaw, who you never see around anymore, and Suge White, who got banned for some racist remarks. So
Uh,
I was the top of my class, and there wasn't as many people in that class. Whereas now it's debatable if I'm even top 10 anymore. And it's not that I've gotten worse, it's just that everyone around has gone
Oh
crazy.
yeah, I mean, dude, I started maybe I don't know when you started rap battling, but I like my first live battle was in 2013, but I started in like text forums like back in I don't know 2004, 2003. So
Wow.
I mean I've been doing it for a long time. But like I've been kind of paying attention to the rap battling scene since back in the LR or sorry WRC days, back in Scribble Jam, kind of around that, and like. I would argue that even like right now, even though like maybe the popularity of battle rap isn't as high as it's ever been, I think the talent pool, the skill, especially of like the younger guys who are coming up, I think it for sure has gotten to a level of the craft that I think it never has been and it's really intimidating even for me having been around for as long as I have, especially because I've been around as long as I have. I'm supposed to be the veteran and be able to kind of keep up with these guys, but like
I,
you got
I
people
feel
like
that same pressure.
yeah, yeah,
I really feel that same pressure. I feel like the overall popularity of battle rap in terms of views, at least in English speaking forms, has dwindled a little bit, but I think part of what you've seen from that is that the people who are really sticking around are the people who are really there for the intricate stuff. And so it's forcing the people who are still keeping the paying audience paying attention to be even more intricate and even more creative. It's like um for in music, for example, you might have something like punk rock that's really popular, and then you got something like progressive metal, which is harder to play and
right,
less people are into it, but the people who are into it get more out of it. I feel like
right,
so. I feel like right now, battle rap is kind of like in a state where it's not as mainstream, but it's a lot more technical. So
right,
it's still really interesting, and I really hate the whole battle rap is dead narrative because art forms, especially something like battle rap, it doesn't die. I mean, jazz died when rock and roll came along, and
mhm.
people still paid to see Snarky Puppy concerts. Jazz is
I'm
still
not even gonna
around.
lie. See, that's the thing. Like, I've listened to some of your other podcasts, and you have a very eclectic music taste. I know that. Like, you
Yes.
seem to listen to a lot of different genres and stuff. I couldn't. If you asked me to name one jazz musician, Snarky Bumpy, what's it called? I don't know what you just said, but that I don't know these artists and stuff. But
Well, first off, everyone go listen to the Snarky Puppy album Somni that came out this year. It's
Snarky Puppy, that's what
genius.
it was.
But yeah, there's yeah, I've always just really been into all different sorts of creative arts, and music I think has probably been the biggest one overall. Um, I have mind that is not extremely good at concrete things, but is very good at abstract things. So I have tons of knowledge of different music, and I play drums. That's the only instrument I'm really skilled at. I know a little bit of music theory. I've dabbled with electronic production and stuff, but like as far as what I listen to a lot of metal. I listen to some rap and hip hop. I listen to Christian emo rock from the 2000s,
Right.
which is honestly was my first big genre I really liked growing up.
Right.
And I also got really into like Afro funk stuff like William Onyeabor and just a bunch of stuff that's not even in English that people have no idea what it is.
Are you one
Uh,
of those people that maybe because you do have such an eclectic, taste of, different genres and stuff, are you a little bit what's the word, pedantic about maybe the pop stuff, the stuff that everybody hears on the radio,
I
the
had I had a phase early on when I was like 18 where I was like the most obnoxious musical elitist possible, and
right.
I like to think that I
I've
very
had like
quickly
glimpses of
realized.
it, but but that's like mostly what I listen to is like the popular stuff. So I don't really, yeah,
Well, I think I had a little bit of that, but I think I realized pretty quickly how cringe that was. And
right.
what I eventually realized is that I do like a lot of popular stuff. It's just that my favorite stuff is usually the stuff that's just a little bit out there and a little bit more unique and creative. And so, like, we're allowed to play music at the place I currently work while we work, and I'm known for people walk by and they've never heard a single thing that I'm playing,
Where
and
do
I'm
you
like,
work
oh,
now?
I'm working at a place called Allied Wire and Cable. That's basically like a cable spooling
And
type
so
of
where
position.
does music kind of come into that? I'm just wondering like how that.
We're just working at our workstations, and it's like in a big warehouse setting, and so we're allowed to play music on the speakers while we work.
When you said play music, I imagine you there with the drums and
Oh,
putting on
no,
a putting
we're
on a
allowed to play
performance and
other
stuff while
people's
somebody's going
music.
on with their little cable spooling, just like
Yeah, so but like I have a reputation of just playing stuff that nobody's ever heard before, and
right.
I I tell my coworkers, "Oh, this is just the palatable stuff. This is the stuff I'm comfortable with other people walking by listening to. If it was just me by myself, it would get much weirder, believe me."
Um, yeah, so there's a lot of directions that we can go with this, but one thing I definitely wanted to kind of touch on in the battle rap scene, you are known as, not a Christian battle rapper, but you are one of,
Mhm.
you are a battle rapper who happens to be Christian.
Yes.
In addition to, you got people like A Ward and, all of the Four Horsemen, and there are definitely others, but, you know, battle rap is really an interesting kind of genre where you have like such an eclectic mix of people and it really is kind of if I think about even the people that I've interviewed on this podcast, I've had XQZ and Solcon, both of who are Jewish.
Hmm.
My last one was with a guy named Mekshadi. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but he's a Muslim. I'm agnostic. Yeah, XQZ is also he's somewhere between Jewish and agnostic, but and then
Hmm.
yourself obviously being Christian, and so I mean it is, and also it's also not taboo to talk about it because you're kind of supposed to. Like, that's one of the things I do like about battle rap because, you are supposed to be yourself. You're supposed to bring the
Yeah, yeah.
things about yourself that are unique and true to you. And that's kind of like what we do. We kind of like, sometimes we, insult each other. That's the kind of what the sport is to like kind of, I'm going to bring like my perspective of the world and you're going to bring your perspective of the world. And it's done in a way that we all agree to the sportsmanlike conducts of what
Hmm.
how we agree to do things, and for the most part I would say most people in battle rap are all, pretty friendly with each other. We all kind of, I think we transcend in a lot of ways like the tribalism that we kind of have in the real world of outside of battle rap, where there is a little bit more, oh, this is my group of people, that's your group of people. We don't really interact with each other so much. Um, so I think that's a
Yeah,
really
it's
cool, interesting aspect of battle rap.
I think it's a very interesting aspect of battle rap that everyone is united around a very random and weird thing, just insulting each other
Yeah.
in rhyme. And then you end up with people from completely different walks of life who might not even get along with each other in a normal situation, but because they have this appreciation for an art form, they're able to talk with each other and uh, see each other as people, even if they
Right.
might not even completely see each other's
Well,
perspectives.
I mean, I would argue that the reason why people don't see each other as people is just because they don't give each other the chance, right? It's like
Yeah.
when, there's very much, like if I haven't ever interacted with, somebody from a different, group, then like I don't know what that group is like. I can only look from the outside and like look, through like, the looking glass and be like, oh, what are they doing over there? I can't tell, and then I kind of create my own, perception of who those people are. And I think that
Yeah.
will bring out the worst of how we perceive each other because, we kind of tend to, I think it's a human characteristic, because, I mean, my perspective of things, I'm a bit more, agnostic, closer to like maybe atheism, but I do believe in, evolutionary biology and things like that. And so I look at, humans as, we all evolved from animals and I think that we just have a inherent property in ourselves where we are fearful because, that's a survival mechanism. And so we are fearful of other people and unless we, have the opportunity to be exposed to them. So like, I think quite often, like when you think about like, who are the most, racist, people, especially when we talk about like, racist white people, they tend to be people that live in, the middle of the country that probably have never even met a black person, right? Like, and so
Yeah, I feel like
it's really easy to
it's
like
very
not.
difficult. It is very difficult to be racist if you're around people who aren't like you for a long period of time because you end up realizing that you're all just people and that you all have foibles in different ways. And I feel like I was actually very blessed with my upbringing. I was raised in a very traditional Christian household, but we were also involved in ministry in the inner city in Cleveland. My dad was working with the city mission in Cleveland, Ohio for a number of years. So for a long time, I was like the only white kid on my block or whatever. And so I grew up with these very diverse experiences as far as racial, also religious, also like etc. And I've growing up, I've realized that a lot of the people I met don't have that same experience. And I
Right.
feel like it's not made me realizing that some people haven't had that experience has not made me tolerant of racism or bigotry, but it has made me like more understanding of where certain people who don't have the same experience are coming from and maybe a way to get talking with them in a way that they can actually understand where I'm coming from as someone who like has had these diverse experiences and the
Right.
way I look at the world. I don't know
Yeah.
if I worded that very well, but
No,
just
I understand what you're saying. I feel like, for myself, I had a weird like upbringing. Like I was kind of all over the place. I mean, I went to a different preschool, first grade, kindergarten, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, all at different schools. Then I went to high school, which is a different school. Then I went to another high school, which is a different school, then college. And then I lived, with my mom. I lived, with my stepmom at one point. And it's just like I just, I feel like I got exposed to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I almost like I take it for granted a lot. I forget about this a lot because I forget that there are people who literally kind of live in a bubble of like, oh, I've only ever lived in one house for like 10 years. I've only ever lived in one, city or one, or been around one community for most of my life. And because for me, I've never had that stability. I've always been jumping around from, I've lived in a trailer. I've been homeless. I've lived in the suburbs. I've lived in one of the nicer, suburbs in Maryland. Granted, I was living with my wife's parents, but like, it was a $2 million house, these are all different experiences that I think, kind of led me to like kind of, I don't know. I never really thought about them until, I started being more conscious of like, why are things the way they are? Why are so many people, I think, maybe hateful toward each other? Why, just like, I, 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 I don't know. Like, as I've gotten older, I just think about these things a lot. And that's like kind of, it's both frustrating, but also at the same time, I do, as you said, I do feel like I can understand it, because I can also, I can see that in myself, right? Like I can see that like, okay, yes, I went through these experiences, but if I did not, then maybe I would, view things and view the world in a different way. And I think, I've also seen it that like, racism is an inherent property in pretty much everybody, right? Like, I've had times where I just,
You're hitting
exclude. I'm
yeah, you're
sorry.
hitting the nail on the head here. I feel like the most commonly racist people tend to be the people who aren't willing to admit that they're capable of some form of bigotry in their heart somewhere,
Right.
because then they're not actively fighting against it. And so you end up with these cultural biases that slip in whether you're realizing it or not.
Right.
So I
And you
feel
can
like
see it in like it's not I want to just specify it's not exclusively a white thing. It's like I've been in groups of where I'm the only white dude and all everybody around me is black, but I also they also, I mean, it's not racist toward me, but they will kind of, because I am able to integrate just by nature of having been through so many different experiences, that like I can see that like they have they themselves will admit, that they have racist biases, and there are sometimes infighting between, themselves in terms of, there's a spectrum. I mean, like, you have people that are like, Hotep or something like that. That's obviously a much more, bigoted form of, being black than it is, so it's just like it's a property that everybody is capable of, because I think we all kind of, again, if I just come back to it, it's like we all evolved, from animals, and we all came from, this, like, I mean, this is the way I don't know if you're creationist or not. I don't want to,
I'll,
apply
I'll leave
my worldview
I'll
onto you.
I'll leave that up for the audience to decide. Suffice to
Okay.
say that I am interested in biology, but I also do have a worldview that is very much based on divine purpose.
Right.
So, without getting directly into the whole evolution versus creationism debate, which I think is usually a big red herring anyway, I
Yeah.
do think that humans are ultimately, regardless of the format in which we got here, designed by God for specific purposes. And I feel like one of those purposes is to treat each other decently.
Right.
And I feel like it's really easy to not treat each other decently when you don't even understand who or even what the other person is. Like, there's people who are racist against um someone who's Indian because they think they're a Muslim and they're not Muslim, and it's based on a whole
Yeah,
set of
I mean,
stereotypes that don't
that's
even
so
apply
far
to
off the
them.
mark though, because now you're racist. You're racist, and you don't even know why you're racist, because the person that you're racist against is not the person that you're racist against.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. I will say, when you said that, I immediately almost thought about like Sean O'Shawn, because he battled Real Sick. So Real Sick, for anybody who may not know, is Sikh. So but Sean O'Shawn battled him, and he had quite a few like Muslim kind of like insults against Real Sick. But it's just like it's a little frustrating, because it's just like, I mean, that's also kind of something that you do see in battle rap too. Not only in that capacity, I'm sure maybe there. there are probably some people that may, I don't know, has anybody ever done that to you where you feel like, oh, they're portraying me as,
Oh,
a certain type of Christian, but I'm not that type of
yeah.
Christian?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned real
Which is
sick because
that's not even the same like equation because like Sikh and Muslim are not even like the same umbrella, but at
oh
least
yeah,
like,
yeah,
Christianity can have different, forms.
yeah. I've definitely heard people apply things that didn't apply to me at all. Real sick is a good example because he talked about my dad being a Catholic preacher, which is
Okay, yeah, that
not
that that
not
is
true.
exactly kind of what I was kind of getting at. And that does happen
Uh,
more often than not in battle rap, and I feel like it's a little
yeah,
bit
a lot of
it's a little
different
lazy.
things. Yeah, a lot of different things get lumped together, and I feel like in addition to that, even if they are getting the denomination correct, there's just assumptions about things I believe about different stuff that may be different or at least
Yeah.
more nuanced than someone might initially assume. And I feel a lot of the time like I want to say it was 2019. I think it was the event where I battled Notch. I was in Paul Mar's basement hanging out with people, and some people were drinking and smoking weed. And someone made a remark that, oh, he's over, Christian boys over there judging us. And I'm like, you have no idea how common an experience it is for me to just hang out with people who are doing things that I don't do. This is something I'm incredibly used to. I'm not over here judging you people.
Right.
I'm I'm I don't feel the freedom to partake. Um,
Well, is it
I
freedom? I mean, is it something that you have a desire to do? If you weren't religious, what is it a thing that you would do? Would you, I don't know, drink and or smoke?
There are certain things that if I wasn't religious, I would probably do more than if I was. But I feel like I'm ultimately gaining more from not than I am from
Right.
going in on it. I
And I'm
feel
not, I'm
like
not, I'm not trying to like persuade you. I'm just trying to understand you a
I
little
know,
bit.
I know, I know. But for example, with drinking, I'm not completely dry. I will occasionally have a drink, but
Right.
I limit myself to a single serving in a day because, from my understanding of my religious uh, duties as a Christian, I understand that I'm not supposed to become inebriated. So
Right.
I've never gone as far as being drunk or even tipsy. And I would feel like I had violated some sort of covenant between me and God if I did.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a set in stone thing where I think, oh, the Bible says exactly that this amount is exactly how far you should. I don't think there is an exact amount. It's subjective between the believer and their understanding of the scripture as long as it's being interpreted in a way that is sincere and motivated in a heart for following God. So I don't get drunk.
Right.
Would I get drunk if I had my if I wasn't religious, if I wasn't trying to follow God? Probably, and I don't think
Let
it
me
would
let
lead me
me
to a
tell
good
you let
place.
me tell you as a person who as I have spent 20 years or more struggling with alcoholism, not worth
Mhm.
it. Not worth it. You're better
That's
off on your side.
yes. I'm understanding that a lot of the things I grew up not doing, I'm glad that I grew up not doing.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just always kind of feel like it's a little odd though, right? Because, there I don't know. See, I'm not very well informed on all of the different branches of Christianity. I grew
Hmm.
up Catholic. Um, my
Gotcha.
my mom would go to church sometimes. Sometimes she was the type of
Yeah.
person that was like, oh, I'm gonna do it, but she would like kind of, it's the way some people are like, I'm gonna lose weight, and then they just kind of like, they go on a diet
Yeah.
for like
Yeah.
a couple weeks, and then they like kind of like taper off, and she
Hmm.
was that way about church and like so we would go to church I did for one year I did go to a Catholic school when I was in like second grade and my mom went there like pretty much her entire like when she was growing up and I think my dad did as well. I'm not 100% sure on that one but either way uh I will say that for me, obviously they had like wine, obviously with the blood of Christ
Hmm.
with the presenting. So it does feel a little bit odd to be like, okay, our stance is that we're not going to get inebriated, but we are going to introduce people to wine. I was the very first time I took the Eucharist or whatever. It was I was like three, third, fourth grade or something like that. Like, maybe I don't remember what grade it was, but it was pretty young. And it's just like, I mean, I guess now that I think about it, it's like, yeah, they did have, they did have, certain, like guidelines, like, okay, under a certain age, you're not gonna drink it. But like, I still think
Hmm.
that you were allowed to choose. I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. My exact branch of Christianity is kind of in flux. I am very devout in my belief in Jesus. I'm not very devout in my belief in a particular branch. I would technically be considered a Protestant. I would consider Catholics and Orthodox Christians to also be my brothers and sisters in Christ. You mentioned alcohol. I feel like what's interesting about that is just the history of how wine, especially, was used in the culture that the tradition is coming out of. For example, in the Bible, there's this guy, Paul, formerly Saul, ended up being called Paul, writing to this younger guy, Timothy, and he tells him in scripture to take a little wine for your stomach's sake. And part of the reason why this was something that was commanded was because if you think about alcohol, it wasn't just a tool for inebriation, it was used to preserve things. And in places where there wasn't water that was like always clean or drinkable, you could
Right.
count on the alcoholic substance to be clean enough that if you drink it, you're not going to get sick.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the traditions involving cleanly things involving wine uh, kind of came about for that reason. So yeah, it's really interesting how alcohol has been used throughout history because like even in more recent Christian traditions, you've got the Trappist monks. They not only invented certain ales, they like literally some of the most popular beers in the world were invented by like Christian monks, but they lived while they were fasting exclusively off of them. So there's actually this really rich history of brewing in different Christian communities
That's
that
weird.
people don't know about. And they weren't like getting blitzed off of it. They weren't getting drunk. They were using it in a way that was sparing and dignified per se. Because I mean, they had a very strict tradition, but at the same time, they were creating some really interesting stuff, and they were getting good at it. Like Trappist ales are still popular today.
Hmm. I mean, I'm sure even back then, like there were probably people who like got drunk, right? I mean, I'm not
Mhm.
very, I'm very, very ignorant when it comes to, what's inside of the Bible. And I think a lot of people are, but I'm willing to admit it. But also,
Well, I think to a degree, everybody is. Um, I went to a couple different Christian schools. Um, I was not the best scholar, but I have a good base knowledge. But
right,
I know people who could just talk theology and the specific places it comes from for days, and like I get lost with them. But
right.
I'm around people like that all the time. But yeah, there is a lot of ignorance. Just even in a society that's kind of sort of Christian or post-Christian like America, even people who are regularly going to church just either aren't reading the Bible or aren't reading the Christian authors that have really taken the work to dig into it, the cultural context and what how it aligns with now, what certain words mean, what they meant back then, all the different translations, where they come from and how they align with all the many, many, many different um, copies that were produced.
Right.
It's honestly not that confusing once you dive into it. It's just a lot of information, and people don't like having to sort through a lot of information. They just want the quick, digestible version, and you don't always get that.
Yeah. I will say one part of it is like it's a tough thing to read because sometimes the language is very like ye old the way
Well,
that they would write back then. It was very like sometimes it was deliberate to be like kind of like the scholars of the time, they wrote in a way that was kind of pedantic, but it was hard to
it
it's
doesn't
really hard
it
to
doesn't help that
digest.
it doesn't help that certain sects of Christianity are really dedicated to, I would say, outdated translations, like
Right.
specifically from a few centuries back. And I think they feel like, oh, this is closer to the. No, it's closer to how people talked 300 years ago. It's not closer to being a good, accurate representation of what's being communicated. And
I mean,
there is a ton of study tools as far as digging into different translations. When I was at school, we had a program called Logos, which allowed you to compare like every possible translation and the different manuscripts they came from side by side. So it was like really in-depth stuff. I wish I could get more into it if I was a little bit more of a scholarly type. I'm more of an artsy guy.
right. So I mean, let me ask you this. Is it I'm trying to figure out how to frame this right. I don't know. There's a couple thoughts I had because, number one, let me just tell you my understanding of like what I do know because I don't claim to know much. I just kind of, I'm pretty like I don't know. I'm well read on some things, mostly technology and things that are like more modern and like I'm a programmer and like I do like dig a little into like philosophy and economics and things like that. But my general understanding is that obviously you have the Old Testament and the New Testament, but at the
Mhm.
end of the day, there is a very clear difference between kind of the stories and even like the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament. I mean, it seems like, in the Old Testament, number one, there was a lot more tragedy, things like maybe like the Book of Job, where like, somebody is being like kind of, tormented over and over again, even though they're like, a very faithful, good person.
Mhm.
And then I think there's a part of the Old Testament that, mentions, that there are exceptions, for like warfare if it's, under, well, it might be under self-defense or it might just be under like, spreading, bringing in a religion. I don't remember the exact quotes, but I think there was just, like something about like, lay waste to like, the village, something along that, and I don't want to, feel free to say you're not, particularly like an expert on this particular subject. I'm just asking because I'm interested.
Mhm.
But then there's also the New Testament, which in my
Mhm.
mind I always think of Christianity as being more representative of the New Testament, even though they somehow like align. I haven't fully like I get that. I guess my understanding is that like and again I'm very ignorant on here, but my understanding is that like the when Jesus came and died, it was because the old world was so kind of maybe corrupt in some ways, and that he was kind of basically kind of hitting a reset on it, and that going forward, my general understanding is that Jesus doesn't really have any exception for, violence, right? There's not really, it's not like, oh, if somebody is going to attack me, I'm gonna shoot them with a gun, right? Like
Gotcha.
Jesus himself, like was being killed. That was the whole reason, and he was passive the whole time because he is so
Yeah.
loving and caring that
Yeah.
even when
People,
somebody,
I'll jump in here.
yeah,
On the difference between God and the Old and New Testament, I tend to see it more as the same God in two different situations reacting differently.
right.
Whereas in the culture that we're looking at in the New Testament, it wasn't. the peak of civilization, but it was a little bit more civil than back in the Old Testament when people weren't obeying God, they were busy sacrificing their children to various foreign gods.
Right.
Um, you're going to be a little bit more stern or in a harsher mood when you're dealing with a situation that's a lot more savage and tribalistic than what you end up with. Uh, that is kind of how I see it to some degree. There's certain areas where that doesn't quite line up. There's areas where it doesn't fall into. There are certain things that I still wrestle with, and that's fine. We're all on our own journey and figuring out exactly how we feel about things. But as far as Jesus being pacifistic, I feel like people tend to paint Jesus as this peace-loving hippie, and to some degree, there's an accuracy to the statement, and to some degree, there isn't, because Jesus was willing to get quite violent to the point of chasing people out of a temple with whips. And
What, can you tell me the
specifically,
context of what that was? Like, why was he?
yes, in context, Jesus was in the temple and he saw a bunch of different people, specifically religious leaders in the temple, who were using the temple to sell various goods at exorbitant prices.
Right.
So basically,
I,
he considers this blasphemous. It is using the holy place of God for selfish gain, turning something that's meant to be sacred into something that's basically just based on greed. And
right.
so what you end up with is probably the most violent you ever see him get is he takes a whip, he starts chasing people, specifically the religious leaders who were doing this,
Right.
out of the temple with a whip and just scolding them and driving them off, flipping over their tables, having no respect for the property they were selling,
Right.
basically chasing them out of the environment. So I don't necessarily see that as peace loving hippie Jesus. Just go with the flow, man.
I will.
Jesus.
I
I
mean,
feel like,
yeah, yeah. I will say that, like, that seems like maybe, like, I mean, it's an interesting, reasoning as motivation as to why he did it, right? It's like, I'm
yeah, I feel like people expect him to go after the people they don't like,
right,
and if the people you don't like are people in another religion or people who are different than you in some silly way. I think if you look at scripture, the people who Jesus was most critical of were people in the religious institution that he was in, that he was speaking to, who were corrupt. And I
right.
feel like that rings true today for me in terms of how I view the teachings of Jesus, is that it's self-critical before it's critical of the world.
Right. And to that point, like, this I mean this was I don't know how, I mean I'm willing to be, very explicitly political, but I don't know how political you're willing to be. And feel free if
Uh,
you don't feel comfortable, we don't have to talk about it. But it's just like I feel like I see kind of, not even that. Okay, we don't even have to go political, but there are for sure, some churches that have been known to use their churches to like generate money. You can like I can't like Osteen I think was maybe an example.
well, I will say regarding people misunderstanding Christianity from the outside, Joel Osteen is an absolute joke to everyone I've ever known
Right,
as a serious believer. Like, not even the most conservative people I know take him seriously.
right. Yeah. So I mean, like I think it's interesting. I mean, do you know much about like the actual like crucifixion when he was being crucified? Because I find it interesting, right? He would be, more like why didn't he like he knew he was going to be crucified? Why not go after those
Mhm.
guys with the whip? You know what I mean?
Well, I think part of that is just fulfilling his purpose. He was
Yeah.
praying a lot before that, talking to God about clearly he was having trouble with the idea of going through with it because he knew it was going to be painful. But the crucifixion is part of the gospel story, and it's I think the central premise of Christianity as a whole, which is that God in human flesh came down and sacrificed himself so that anyone who believes is a tricky word. I think if we're talking about belief as the Bible defines it, it's more trust or like a sincere desire to follow. And
Right.
basically, anyone who believes in that sacrifice is cleansed of their sins. And I
Mhm.
think he's not going after the people who are crucifying him, in part because he came to save them. When he's being crucified, he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He is extending forgiveness to them, not only by dying in their place, which is the whole premise of the gospel, but also in the realization that these are the people, these are the confused, frightened people who even though they're against me, I understand them and I want them to ultimately find goodness and salvation. So I feel like Jesus had a lot more vitriol for people who were claiming to already be with him or with God and then not living according to the principles he was setting forth than he ever did for anyone who was like actively against him. And that's an interesting way of looking at things for me. And it's affected me a lot to the point where like even the stuff I get angry at in my personal life, it's almost never like I see people say all sorts of crazy stuff about me or my beliefs or etc. online, and I almost never get really angry at it. When I get angry, as if I see someone who claims that they are following Jesus and they're doing something really stupid that makes every all of us look bad. That's when I get angry.
Yeah. No, I mean, see, that's the thing. Is like, I mean, I like I'm admittedly sometimes I can be critical of Christianity, and I'm more so critical of it than other religions. Number one, because I grew up, kind of like exposed to
Mhm.
it, and then and additionally, I think that it is the one religion that permeates America more than anything else. So it's like and also America happens to be the world's biggest military of all time, and so
Yeah.
that. I always think about like like and again I don't want to push you too far out of your comfort zone, so just if I
Mhm.
if I ever if I ever ask you or say anything that you don't feel comfortable with, just tell me to move on. We can move on. I can always edit stuff out or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's
um
all good.
but so, I just like I look at something like, right now the actual Department of whatever Homeland Security has, like put
Mhm.
out like a tweet or something, saying that, that they're gonna identify, America as a Christian nation. But like this is the government, right? And the government,
Yes.
we as people, and it's not just America, but every government on earth, we as people all give power to our government to be the monopoly on murder, really. I mean, that's what war is, that we give our governments the kind of the I mean, I can say we give them the right, but they also have all the guns. So what are we really going to do, even if we didn't want them to have, But like, it's just like they do have, like the ability to say, oh, we're going to go to war with that country. And I think we as citizens, no matter what side you are on or whatever, whether you're conservative or liberal or whatever, I think we as citizens all probably want, we want our government to only, instigate in wars that we think are going to make the world a better place. Now we can argue all day about what is going to make the world a better place, and
Mhm.
that's where but at the end of the day, it's like as soon as you take religion and then you kind of like tie it to the government, which is the entity that has the power to
Yes.
go out into war,
It's
then that like gives an identity, and now like it's like it just takes tribalism and puts it in, kind of
yes,
projects it onto the government.
it is honestly dangerous, and I hate it. I feel like one of the biggest problems I have lately is just having to detangle, partially in my own philosophy and also just in the viewpoints of other people around me, like separating the what I would consider the purest form of Christianity with what I see in American Christian nationalism, which I actually see as not only different from the teachings of Jesus and different from like um, Christianity as I see it, but like antithetical to it in a lot of
Right.
ways. And it's gotten to a point where I meet people, they find out I'm a Christian, and they automatically start assuming these Christian nationalist things about me, that it's part of my
Right. And
belief
to be
system when
fair,
it's
and
really
I just want to say
quite
that
the
I hate that
opposite.
for you. I hate that for you. And I hate that I also, it's like because it's like I have to be like, for me, I feel like I need to be like outspoken against, when I see things like that. But at the same time, I also understand that like, not like that. I mean, not even not everybody is like that, but I honestly, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I honestly believe that the majority, whether that be like 50% or more, the majority of Christians are not really in favor of that type. Like they're in general good people, and that they want,
Yeah, I feel like it's more complicated than that. I feel like it's a nice bigger number. You might have like 95 plus people who are well-meaning, good people, but at the same time, people are not coming into these ideologies with a thorough understanding of what they are or where they came from or what parts are intrinsic to Christianity and what parts are more a byproduct of hundreds of years of nationalism in this country specifically. So they go into faith looking for God in like a pure, sincere way, and they end up accidentally getting leached onto these ideas that are either not from scripture or not from a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Sincere or accurate interpretation of where Jesus is actually coming from. And nobody's teaching them. A lot of churches are not teaching them how to navigate these things properly. And so they end up listening to some really terrible people who are
I mean, I think
claiming.
like one example, I think Nick Fuentes would, call himself,
Ugh,
yeah, I think he would
ugh,
call himself a Christian, and this is a guy that
I
said
don't.
Hitler is cool, and to be fair, I want to, and I don't want to get in the habit of defending Nick Fuentes. It could be argued that like the reason he said that Hitler is cool is because he literally like thinks that the the way he looks and like I don't know. I don't want he's what you call an edgelord on the internet. He basically goes out of his way to say things that are shocking, and goes out of his way to say things that are divisive because it will generate money and views and attraction. But he does get influence that I think is kind of scary.
It is really scary, and I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm being more harsh on Christians than you are. I'm saying that yes, most Christians you meet are good people, and would argue that if they're really diving into the scripture and the teachings of Jesus accurately, then they're going to become better people as a process. But also, a lot of people are accidentally getting into these really dangerous ideologies that are very self-centered or prosperity centered, where it's more about money and prosperity than it is about actually bettering yourself as a
Right.
person or getting closer to God as a believer. and they're ending up with things that are really just selfish and not good. And it's common even among people who are very well meaning and who are otherwise good people because they haven't been taught how to navigate all of these different issues very well. And honestly, I place some of that blame on churches because we are teaching people the fundamentals of Christianity only at a surface level and not diving deep into a lot of things that are actually important. People would rather have their ears tickled or being told that their way of going about things that they're locked into is exactly right. There's no wiggle room for, oh, but have you considered this or that or the other thing? And it's not that I'm not dogmatic about some things. I am, but I know the things that I am dogmatic on are very specific points, and there's things even in scripture where it tells us not to really come down hard on certain issues. Like if it's a minor issue, then either keep it to yourself or be willing to have some type of leeway with how you operate around it. The Apostle Paul talks quite a bit about that, and people don't seem to read that. I don't know.
Right.
Basically, what I'm getting at is that it is frustrating to be a Christian in America right now because there is a whole lot of talk and not a whole lot of it is grounded in much of anything. And that's both people outside the church commenting on it and people inside the church commenting on what's outside the church.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mess, but I feel like the one thing that does anchor me is my own faith, my own prayer life, my own reading of the scripture. And I think especially having a few different people who I really trust, who I can talk to about these things, who I know aren't going to give me anything really weird and are actually going to interact with me in a way that's respectful and good. And it's an up and down thing where I have times when I'm really frustrated, but then I end up coming back to a place where I really understand why I started trusting Jesus in the first place and how beautiful it seems.
Right.
And when I'm in that mode, it's like the best thing.
Right.
It's like I have my purpose. I understand why I'm here. And even the things I don't understand, I'm willing to just admit that I don't understand them and leave it up to just the fact that I'm human and fallible.
Right. Well, see, that's an interesting thing you just said, though. I think a lot of people, and this isn't exclusive to being religious or whatever religion you're from, a lot of people have a very, very hard time being able to admit that they don't know, right? They don't understand certain things, and it takes a certain level of humility to be able to say, yeah, I don't know. And I think, this is kind of how I kind of like I look, like even I go through my own cycles of like, struggling and figuring out like how to perceive the world in a way that I feel is ethical. And I always feel like, because, I never really ascribed to any particular religion, even though I was, kind of, as a young kid, I was still introduced to, certain values. I was introduced to the Ten Commandments and, those things. So they do kind of, and in general, that's kind of like, American culture, because Christianity is such a big part of, how America was founded. So all of these things are kind of like built into our, our society. And there's probably a lot of things that we take for granted that, even if you're not religious, they are things that you grow up with and are surrounded with that we have in our culture as Americans that can be attributed.
Our culture is surrounded with the language and symbols of Christianity, but not necessarily a really nuanced or complex understanding of the values that it's putting forward. It's more in line with, I would say, the colonial spirit of the people who arrived in America than it is with the history of Christianity as a whole.
Right. But for me, it's just like I have to, it's like I have to grapple with, how do I try to be, a good person, right? And it's like it's tough, right? Like I've had a really weird life, like in a lot of different ways, and like, there were times when, I have a couple different things. Let me say it like this.
Hmm.
So the battle rap culture, um, the battle rap culture is a great example of a place that it will test you, in terms of your
Absolutely.
character. People, can be very abrasive, can be very rude, can be very, confrontational sometimes. So it's really hard to, you know, uh, you know like how do you like I mean for you I'm sure it can be difficult as well if somebody gets in your face and not just like in a battle, like a battle is a battle, like we kind of understand, like we're gonna insult each other. It's we all love the sport, we do it, but like outside of the battle we also sometimes have feuds with each other, and you could say something really like minute. You could say, oh, I didn't like the shirt you were wearing in that battle, and somebody could take it really personal, and maybe they get it's very easy to evolve into getting into a conflict with somebody. And
Yeah,
I
I've,
just
I've had weird, difficult experiences at times, knowing exactly how to navigate that, not only as a person, but as a believer, particularly as a
right.
Christian. Because what you're expected just from the culture is that, oh, you're supposed to be an example of upstanding, good personhood.
I mean, that's what
And
you're expected. I don't have that expectation of me, right? Like, because I'm not a Christian.
yeah, but it's weird. It's like people aren't necessarily looking at Christians as pinnacles of morality, but as an archetype. I'm still expected to uphold a particular standard, and I think it's good that I am. I think it's good that Christians are being held to a high standard. It's just odd to me the way it happens, and I feel like sometimes I'm expected to be perfect, and I'm not. I've made a lot of really strange mistakes like along my way. I think what I mostly regret is everything surrounding the FIBO battle.
Hmm.
Um, it was a, it turned out well as a battle, but I was just not in a headspace that I really look back on fondly. It was very, I let it become more than just like a rivalry. And it's not that I would have said that I actively had negative thoughts or feelings about FIBO as a person. I really didn't. But I got so wrapped up in the battle and the rivalry of it that I feel like I acted in ways that I'm not really happy with. It was prideful, it was arrogant, and looking back on it, I'm not really happy with it. I feel like the big thing with being a Christian in battle rap isn't that I'm not going to make any mistakes. It's that I'm going to want to reconcile with people as quickly as possible. That's something that's taught very much in scripture is if you have something against your brother, do not let the sun go down before you fix it.
Hmm. I don't know.
So
I mean, I can only look at it from my perspective, and I feel like maybe you're being a little bit hard on yourself on that one. And,
yeah,
and
I am
just for
being
context, there are a lot of people that
yeah.
might not know Febo is another rap battler who is also a Christian rap battler. And there was like a little bit of confrontation in that battle. Febo at one point did like kind of like shoulder bump you, but like. I think number one, it was a good battle. It made for good content. Granted, like I understand what you're coming from. I understand like maybe like feeling like maybe you would have done things differently, but I don't think you have to be as hard on yourself as you are being hard.
I hear you. I hear you. I am being a little overly hard on myself, but it's partly because I am trying to hold myself uh, to a high
Well,
standard.
something I wanted to say though is that like because I look at this from the outside in, and this is kind of like what I was getting at was like the battle rap, like this is what I'm saying. The battle rap community is a great example of a difficult place to be, live and let live. And you know, I've been in a lot of like places like that, where it's just like it's hard to like not be confrontational. You know, sometimes like, you know, I
I'm
you
gonna
know,
move slightly because my
yeah,
phone
yeah,
is low on battery, so I'm gonna try to
yeah.
plug it
Sorry.
in.
Yeah, but I
Um,
mean, like, so I mean, you know, like, again, I'm not a Christian, so I don't necessarily feel like I have to, you know, I have to do anything. I kind of have to make my own rules and decide for myself who do I want to be. Do I want to be a good person or a bad person? Do I want to, you know, and you know, but at the same time, it's not that straightforward. I've grown up in, you know, some like really kind of shitty, you know, situations. I've been bullied a lot when I was younger. And you know, I grew up learning that like I had to defend myself. I had to, you know, be, because if I didn't, then you know, nobody else was going to. And at the end of the day, it for me, what that meant, you know, mentally, psychologically, was that I had to, you know, retreat into a more primal version of myself, right? I'm very much not that person now because I put in a lot of work, lot of work, you know, to not be like that. But like, you know, it's like me now versus like me before I was 21, you know, are very different people mentally because, you know, there were times when I, you know, it's like and especially like as a man, it's like, you know, I get this, you know, sense of people around me. It's like, oh, you know, it's like if somebody like, you know, punches me in the face, well, now I got to do something about it. Otherwise, people around me are gonna look at me like, oh, you're a bitch. What are you doing? You let that guy fucking punk you out, and like, so I, you know. I took that and I understood like, okay, well, here's what happens. If somebody like tries to bully me and I don't do anything about it, then everybody around me is going to look at me and say, okay, Alan is a bitch. And Alan is, you know, whatever. He's a pussy. He's a fucking loser. Nobody wants to be friends with him. Blah, blah, blah. How do you think that makes me feel, right? Like, you know, I feel like, you know, shit, right? Like, and so what, like, I don't know how to navigate that. I don't know how to figure
it's
out,
tricky
like,
because every situation is different. I feel like this is something that other Christian battle rappers have had an issue with. Um, the idea of, oh, you're supposed to turn the other cheek, you're supposed to turn the other cheek, you're supposed to, and it's almost used like a weapon against you, right? Where you're not
right,
actually criticizing the way someone is living their faith out. You're just using one of the principles they've been taught as a weapon against them to try to work against them for your own purposes. You're taking advantage of them essentially, and it doesn't really work like that. It's not that you shouldn't stand up for yourself. There are definitely instances where you need to stand up for yourself. You also just need to be conscious of the fact that a lot of the time, the people who are trying to get you to react are doing so because they want you to make that error and they want you to go take it to a place where you can't take it back. And so that's where I have a hard time trying to walk it back from, is the exact point from where, okay, this is self-defense versus this is escalation.
right,
And I don't think there is a black and white answer to that. I feel like you just have to be sincerely trying to adhere to the principles that are there in hopefully a good, helpful worldview.
right,
And it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but I I feel like it's also really easy for someone like me who hasn't really gotten into a lot of fights or any fights,
right,
really. Um, I can't just pedantically be like, okay, this is exactly how you should handle a situation. I don't have that experience. I can give you a set of principles that I have for how to handle stressful situations. I can give you a set of beliefs that I have about the nature of how we're supposed to act as people. But at the same time, I'm very much I can't criticize because I'm coming from a place of ignorance when it comes to certain things in culture, specifically confrontations. I suck at confrontations. I've
right.
learned that more and more recently, but it's it's a difficult thing to navigate. But I feel like the biggest thing for me as a Christian is the idea of grace, and that's both God giving you grace, but also giving grace to yourself.
Right.
And admitting that, yeah, you aren't always going to make the right decision. And that's okay because I would say because of the sacrifice of Jesus, I do not have to be perfect. He's been perfect in my place for me. That's the entire point of the thing. So, on one hand, that could be used as an excuse to not try as hard to be a good person. But from my philosophy, it's exactly the opposite. It's I've been shown love and grace, and now I'm expected to give that back in return. And sometimes that is also for me. Like sometimes, yeah, you're right, Alan. I was being too hard on myself over the FIBO thing. Thank you. I need to give myself grace for that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, again, this is something that, I have over time, I've, kind of worked my way through, right? But, like you mentioned, again, you got to remember, I don't have the guardrail of Jesus. I don't have the guardrail of Christianity. I don't have the, oh, you're supposed to, or even I don't have that framework. So it's just like when you don't, so it's like I have to figure out, I would tell you, regardless of how I should have handled it, and I know I should have handled it differently, I will tell you that, when I was younger, the way that I responded to that, because I don't have those guardrails, is that psychologically, I tried to, go into darker places, right? Because nobody told me not to go into darker places. I didn't have any, I didn't have any, reason not to.
Yeah,
And so the
that
idea, I'm sorry.
I think that is to some degree the danger of not having any framework at all is that
I
there's
agree.
no way of knowing you're up from your down. And I feel like not to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche in this conversation of all places, but his
Hey,
idea
hey,
of
I'm down to talk about it. Let's go.
but his idea of like creating meaning for yourself.
Right.
Um, I feel like even for someone like me who does believe that the meaning is coming from a place, I still it requires an act of creation on my part because I have to consciously be able to process it and think of it in a way that I can apply to the world. And that is inherently a creative process. I have to be able to take the information in front of me. In this case, for me, information from scripture, information from the teachings of Jesus, information from other believers, information from my prayer life. And even if I'm getting all of that accurately, the act of putting it together accurately is itself a creative process because otherwise you are not going to have a mental framework for how to process any of this information. So, to some degree, you are really creating uh, your own framework, and you want it to be a good framework, one that is helpful, but also one that is accurate to reality, and one that's going to help you ultimately become a better person. Um, for me, it is. I guess it is easier having a guardrail that I do believe in certain absolutes, but at the same time, I feel like even outside of absolutes, people end up having to create some sort of absolute to frame their worldview. And even if that worldview is vague and strange, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but like it's interesting how similar and how dissimilar different people end up thinking about like the way we process both morality and the way we're supposed to interact with other people.
Well, so the irony though is that as I get older, the more I think about things, the more that I work my way through these things, the more I kind of find myself going back to kind of like a mentality that I think is more in line with what, Jesus himself would actually
That's the irony, right?
yeah, I know it's irony, but at the same time, I think religion is good in ways, but then I just my main concern, ironically, about a lot of Christians is that sometimes they don't act like Christ, right? If every Christian did act like Christ,
Right.
then we would have a phenomenal world, and it wouldn't even be that complicated. But the reality is that it isn't that way. I think for myself, I again. I say what I said in terms of like, okay, I took myself to darker places. I got to places where I was like, okay, now I'm going to be more violent. I would be a lot more kind of like, I had a chip on my shoulder. I was very much, waiting for confrontation because I was, defensive and wait, I was like, I knew at any time if somebody talked to me, I thought, okay, they're just, they're bullshitting me. Like they're coming to me and they're not trying to be nice or be like, if somebody comes up to me that I've never talked to and they're like, hi, I'm like, oh, they're gonna make fun of me or something. I don't know. Like I was very defensive about it. It took me a while to get out of that. It took me a while to work my way through that, but it's like for me, I was able to do that, but not everybody can do that. It really, I mean, some of it, a lot of it is luck, I think. A lot of it is the environment that you're in. But I do think that like, when you get people who got kind of go into these like darker places and they really don't know how to, because I mean, with all, if anybody knows me, I'm especially now, I'm very like nonviolent. I'm a middle class, freaking software engineer. I'm like one of the most hippie loving people that you can know. Yet, I had to evolve into that to some degree because like
all works in process essentially. There's a degree to which we need to give ourselves grace that we're not at the end of our journey and that ultimately we are shaping up to be something better than we are now, and we're not, at least not on this earth, going to arrive at the idealized version of ourselves, even if whether or not that ideal matches what we think it's supposed to. But the process of doing so is inherently good. Like even if you don't arrive at a perfect or even phenomenal version of yourself, even if you have one step in the correct direction and that one thing you did changes someone's day in a way that affects the world for the better, then you've essentially succeeded, at least
right.
as far as moving forward as a human and an individual. And for me, I guess the goal isn't just to like leave a positive impact on people in the sense of making them feel nice, but like actually giving them something beyond what they even might have thought they wanted. Like I'm a Christian. I share the gospel. I would say that I share aspects of the gospel even with people who I know aren't going to accept them, not because I'm trying to win converts necessarily, although that's nice, but also just because I want to bless people in the same way that I've been blessed before. And I wish that was a more common occurrence, like bringing this all back to wishing that Christians acted more like Christ. The world would be better. But at the same time, the fact that so many aren't, it's just an opportunity for growth. We're not going to look at the world and be like, oh, we're not as good as we could be, therefore we're just going to write ourselves off as a whole. We have to just look at the world or our group of people or our belief system or our political group or whatever you want to call it. We have to see it, I would say, the way God sees it, or if that term offends you, then maybe just seeing it objectively from an outside perspective and just calling it what it is and then moving it forward in a way that's actually beneficial and helpful. And even if you move the scale like 0.1%, at least you've done something. And there's grace for you when you fail. And as long as you're trying to move forward, good job.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll pivot just a little bit. I did want to at one point maybe talk about, your battle that you had with SoulCon. And also, I guess I should also plug this while we're here. You do have a battle coming up, which is going to be against Shaji on January 31st, right? And
Yeah, that's going to be a much different vibe than my SoulCon battle.
yeah, no, I mean Shaji is pretty funny, and I mean that's an interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to
You have
that
to have fun against him. If you don't have fun, you're going to lose. If you have fun,
one.
you win.
Yeah. But okay, so let's talk about real quick, maybe your battle with Solcon, particularly your third verse. I know you wrote your round, and so it like I mean the whole battle was kind of like a kind of a themed round. You kind of like announced in your first round it was like round one, I think, and then your second round you said round three, and then like by the third round was like round seven if I'm getting this right. And
Yeah.
then like you kind of explain why you said that because like while you were going through that battle, like while you were writing for that battle, you were going through different battles outside in your own personal life, and those were those rounds four, five, and six. Is that about right?
Yes. The idea was that um, while I'm writing for Soul Khan, I'm dealing with other battles. And what's crazy is this whole concept I had of round one, round three, round seven, and then I already won the other 4 rounds. I had that concept before the tragedy I talked about in that round happened.
Right.
So it was like somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks out from battling Sulkan. I was getting my rounds prepared. I was having trouble finishing round three. I didn't know what to write about. And I got a phone call, or rather, I was at work and I saw that I had missed a bunch of phone calls from my mom. And then when she actually did get a hold of me, I found out that my oldest sister, who is younger than me, but my oldest of my 3 younger sisters, had been killed in a car accident. And
I'm very
it
sorry for your loss, by the way. I mean, like we don't talk about that type of thing, but
it was 2 years ago at this point.
I mean that
So
doesn't change anything. It's your
I
sister of
know,
all things too. I mean, yeah,
I
yeah.
know. Every emotion has been felt, but it's hard in ways that I haven't really talked about before because a lot of people might not know who my sister was. First of all, my sister has 3 kids. Um, Her husband is my brother-in-law is my best friend from college, and he met my sister through me. So it was a very close-knit group of people, and I would say that my sister who died, Renee, was probably my best friend in the world, or the person I was talking to the most and confided most in
Right.
prior to that point. So at that point, my whole world was kind of imploding, but I didn't want to not do the battle, partly because I realized that the round I was writing, the missing ingredient that I was looking for, it was, and it's not like it happened fortuitously, like, oh, my sister died so that I could finish my round. It's stupid to think that way. But the point is, I was writing that round about my sister before I knew she was going to die, is what it felt like. It really did feel like I was writing the round before I knew what the round was even about.
Right.
And so what I say in that round is 2 weeks ago, I had to write an obituary for both of you. And that's not just like a shock value line. I wrote that line because that's what happened. I was literally writing my sister's obituary in one tab and writing my rounds for SoulCon in the other tab. And I wrote that line because I was actually doing both of those two things. And so what you ended up with, it's not my most complex round I've ever written. It's not my most wordplay heavy. It didn't even used to be my favorite round I've written.
No, I thought it
And
was
so,
incredible, but yeah.
um, and there's actually parts of it that I left out because they were too on the nose. Um, what I actually spit was like the edited version that I felt comfortable sharing with the world.
Right.
But basically, how that round operated for me, I wasn't thinking about winning a round or winning a battle. It was the only thing I could think about at the time, and it was exactly what I wanted to say. And I specifically tied my faith into that round because it's really what I was relying on at the time to get me through, and not in a way that, oh, I'm going to see my sister again. That's not the point. I could never see my sister again and it wouldn't matter. But my sister was also a Christian. She was very strong in the faith, and it was her faith in God that was getting me through the process of losing her and believing that her hope actually was being fulfilled. in another world. And so when I was telling Sol Khan, who had talked with A Ward about, I'm fighting for the world we actually live in. And so the line I had in that scheme was, the fact that I do believe in another world is the reason I have energy to battle for this one. It wasn't just me trying to find an angle. It was literally just me talking through my thought process at the time, because
I mean, you're just expressing your feelings. I mean, it sounds phenomenal because you're a phenomenal writer, and you just like you already had that gift in you. You don't need to apply it. It's literally like you just like already know how to make that, and it's like I mean. I had a somewhat similar, but not exactly the same thing. When my dad passed away when I was 21, and it wasn't a battle; it was a song that I was writing. Granted, I started writing the song when I knew that he was going to die. He was in the hospice for like a few weeks or whatever, and he I wrote. I like again, it's like that's kind of like what we do as writers. It's cathartic for us to kind of like maybe express our emotions and especially like rap. Like I've been I started rapping when I was like 13, 14, and like it for sure got me through some of the hardest things in my life because it was a way for me to express myself, especially when I didn't feel like I had anybody to talk to or have anybody to kind of like vent to. And so, when I found out that my dad was, going to pass away, I started writing, a song because, that's what I do. That's how I express myself. That's how I work through my emotions. And I wrote the first two the verses for it, and then like I just didn't have anything for the third. And then it was like the day that he actually passed away. I remember it was my grandfather who called me, and he was like, "Yeah, get down here. It's gonna happen." Now, granted, like I didn't have a very close relationship with my dad, and the way things happened, I just like I was never good at grieving. I never really understood how to work through any of that shit. And so I didn't go see him because like the very last time that I saw him, let me say this real quick. So there were the last two times I saw him. First off, like I said, I didn't have a close relationship with him. But the last time I saw him, that he was not in the hospice. He was in his own apartment. Granted, his leg had like completely swollen up. I think he had liver problems due to alcoholism himself, and like so but he and I actually like kind of talked, and it was actually the only time I ever felt like I had a real like human conversation with him, where I felt like I was able to kind of open up, and like it just felt like a good, like this is like if I were gonna have a last conversation with my dad, that was the conversation I wanted. However, like that wasn't the last time I saw him. It was the last conversation I had with him. The last time I saw him, he was in the hospice, but he was in a complete like comatose, state. So like I couldn't talk to him. He was just on a bed, and it's just like, and he was like kind of like maybe like just like coughing at some points, but he was completely drugged up. And so I just didn't want to go back. Like it was just it would have been the same thing. I didn't know how to process any of it emotionally, all of that. I don't know, whatever. But instead of going to go see him, what I ended up doing is like I literally wrote my third round, not my third round, my third verse, and like it literally just kind of came out. And like whether other people like it or not, I feel like it came out in a way that was beautiful, and like and it was lyrical, because that's what we do as writers. But it's not really something you have to think through. I think it's just like it is kind of magical. It's one of those things where like if I were to believe in a God, that's where I feel like I feel like God. I can see it. I can feel spiritual, where it's like it just flows right through you, and you're like I don't know. It's just like it happens so effortlessly.
A lot of my own experience regarding God and spirituality as a Christian does come from moments similar to that, where I swear I could feel God's involvement somehow. And it's not everything that I base my faith on, because it's from my heart, and the heart is deceitful above all things. But at the same time, the way we process the world and our emotions through creativity is, I think, one of the most deeply human parts of us. And I feel like it's something that has a connection to the divine in a sense, because in the sense that God is the creator, we ourselves are mini creators. Like we create beautiful things that reflect how we see the world, our own experiences, and etc. And I feel like art, especially music, is like inherently spiritual in that way, where it's really connecting us to something that is bigger than ourselves. And I feel like it can come from any emotion, really. I feel like people talking about the philosophy of art, or even like the philosophy of humor, they tend to focus very much on pain, and all art comes from pain, or all humor comes as a result of pain. And I don't really buy into that mindset. People tend to focus on the idea of art as a response to pain. And I feel like pain is one way that good art and really sincere art and human feeling can come about, but I don't think it's the only one. I feel like let's remove pain from the world for a second. Let's say we have heaven. Let's say we have a perfect world with no conflict whatsoever. Would we stop creating art? I don't think we would. I feel like our very nature is we have to create
I
something.
think
I
it
feel
would
like,
be kind of boring art, though. I mean, like there's so much art that is beautiful because we can relate to the pain.
yeah, but in a world where pain is not relatable, what becomes relatable?
I don't know. I don't know. Happiness.
Nobody. That's the thing. It's um. So what I tend to think of it as is the best art comes as the response of deep, sincere emotion of any type. So some of my favorite art is like really depressing sounding death metal. But
Right.
some of my favorite art is also like really happy sounding, bright sounding music that's coming from a place that's more in line with joy. But the thing that takes it from shallow to deep for me isn't the type of emotion being expressed, it's the sincerity with which the emotion is being expressed, and the, I would say, the level of the emotion. Like I get the same type of feeling from listening to a really happy K-pop song that I do with listening to like an experimental death metal song. It's in a weird sense, they're kind of parallel to me. It's both just expressions of the deepest parts of who we are and how our emotions work and how our spirits work.
Right.
I don't know what other way to explain it, but I feel like art as a tool in general tends to be focused on as far as pain, because it's it can help us so much in times where we're going through something crazy. I can't even mention how many times where I've been in a terrible mood, and what made me feel better was playing drums as loud as I possibly could for like an hour at a time or something like that.
Right.
I feel like art is, in a sense, what a lot of us are really made to do. That's one of the reasons I dislike AI so much as far as how it's being
Oh
used in art.
man. Don't
That's
even
a
get
whole
me started, bro.
other. But the point I'm getting at is the point of making art isn't to make the best art. The point of making art is the process of making art and how it enriches us as people. So when you're asking a computer to do it all for you, to make all the creative decisions, it's just
Yeah.
it's not sincere. It not only
Yeah.
is it, and I feel like that's the one thing that can't be replicated in human art as far as technology is considered, is like sincerity. Um, when something, because like even if you have the illusion of sincerity, the sincerity is still an illusion, and as soon as you recognize that this illusion of sincerity has been created, then you don't look at it the same. But if you're
Well, the
looking
people
at,
that are making the money off of it, they're gonna really rely on being able to maintain that illusion, right? Like, the thing is like, what you're saying is like I resonate 100% with it because like there are some songs where like I listen to it and I'm like, it moved me. It like really shaped who I am. I used to listen to certain songs over and over and over again. And at the end of the day, the reason why I like that song so much is because that person went through something and they put that into words the same way that you put into words, the way that you felt during your third round with SoulCon. You went through that, and I think that's a relatable thing that anybody can relate to, like having lost somebody.
Don't relate to it. Even if you don't relate to it, you can relate to the idea of having something that was really important to you happen.
Right.
So like even if what I went through never happened to you, you have something you went through that you can
Right.
probably make the same connection with. And even if it's not something negative, it can be
Right.
something
But to
really
take the
positive.
human element out of that, like to take that, like you're relating to something that it was made by nothing. It was made by a machine that never experienced any of it, right? Like that's fucking. It's like it's sad. It's really. I don't even have the word for it. It's just like it's so
Not only
terrifying and a lot of
not
things.
only it's not only taking the human element out, it's taking the spiritual element out. I
Yeah.
would argue that all art is inherently a spiritual process. And when you're delegating the task to a mechanical process, you're even if what you're creating sounds good on the surface, the fact that you've done it that way at all is removing joy from the process that you could have had with it.
Yeah.
It's difficult to explain, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. All that to
Yeah.
say is even if it's even if it's something like really innocuous, like a smaller part of human experience, something that isn't a big life-changing event. One of my favorite songs recently is John Something by Aesop Rock. It was a
Uh-huh.
song released in the early part of this past year, and it's about a time where he was attending an artist lecture, and the artist spent the first 30 minutes of his presentation not talking about his paintings, but actually just talking about the documentary he had watched the previous night and how much he loved it and how much it had affected him. And it was When We Were Kings with Muhammad Ali and George Foreman as the centerpieces of it. And so the point of the song is that Aesop Rock doesn't remember hardly anything about the artist. He doesn't even remember his name. That's why the song is called John Something. I think his name was John Something. But the point of it was the thing he remembered wasn't the big thing that the artist had presented. It was the sincerity with which he talked about a thing that he loved. And now that love for that thing has stayed with him in his life going
Hmm.
forward. And I feel like even if it's not like a big life thing, even if it's just something really simple that connects one person to other people over time, and that's worth creating. And I feel like we're losing that. And I feel like we talked about with battle rap how much it brings people who might never have been around each other together. Like I'm familiar with people from all walks of life through battle rap that I never would have been around. And I've had really great conversations with people. I've had conversations with people about God that I've never expected to have any conversations with at all. I've had conversations about art with people that I never would have known were into the same art I was in. I've met people in battle rap who I would never think were a Bjork fan, as big a Bjork fan as. And I'm saying her name wrong. It's actually Björk, but everyone says Bjork. So
I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have corrected you. I would have just been like, yeah, Bjork.
I'm just rambling at this point, and
Nah.
I feel like I'm coming to the end of what we were talking about naturally. But basically, I wish that um, Jesus were more accurately represented by religious leaders and by general people in society. And I wish there were less AI art, and I wish that we could all just share our art with each other and have a good time and enrich each other.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to wrap this up, but I wanted to say, first off, thank you so much for taking out the time to, talk to me. Thank you for being so, open and honest and everything. Um, I think, like I was saying earlier, battle rap is a very hard place to, like kind of navigate. And, you can really see somebody's character in battle rap. And that's, part of one reason why I wanted to talk to you, other than the fact that obviously you're an incredible battler, but more like, more than anything, part of why I wanted to talk to you because I know your character. I see your character based on how you interact with people, how you interact with the world. Like it's something that you can watch and like see through actions of other people. And you like if I didn't know somebody's religion and you represent Christianity in a way that I wish that everybody represented Christianity. In a way that like I can tell that you are a very good person. Even if you have faults, sometimes you mentioned like the FIBO battle, whatever. But like I can see that like you are at least making a genuine and like a true effort to actually try to be a good person, and that's what I really want to see out of more people in the world. And I love that you kind of bring that you kind of bring that and spread that, I think, and that's always infectious. So thank you so much for all of that.
Thanks. I do want to say something in relation to that. First off, you're making me tear up. That's great. But uh, that's something that I really love hearing, and I want you to know it was not just something I was born with. It's been a process, and I think the basic gist of that process is that I really did take Jesus and the way he views the world seriously, because there was a time when I was very misanthropic, just kind of hating people in general and just not having a love for humanity at all. And what really convinced me to start loving people and going after the world in a way where I'm not just writing all humans off as terrible is like realizing how much Jesus loved people and the way he viewed people. And if he's who he says he is, and I believe that that's true, then that's something beyond me. And then I have no excuse for not loving people if the creator of the universe does. So it's really been a process that's slow, and I'm glad that it's seeing results, because like I didn't always love the world and now I do. And I'm glad I've met you, and I'm glad I've met a lot of people. And yeah, just some of it is me following faithfully, and I'm glad for that. But it's really just coming from a place of abandoning a lot of who I used to be. So
Yeah. All right, man. Take care of yourself. Get some good rest, and thank you so much for this conversation, bro.
thanks, man.
See you. Good night.
Have a good night. I got to get back to the family now, but
All right. Good
yeah,
luck, man.
combo, man.
See ya.
Thank you.